everybody, Jason Bermas here, and welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. Now, we are going to go to part 2 of this debate on Trump, the assassination, Iran, and really the nature of reality itself in a moment. But I have to point out, as this was being recorded, the quote-unquote ceasefire was announced, and you'll see that during the broadcast. Now, color me skeptical even at the time that this ceasefire would actually take place. You have to remember that the Trump administration also had, quote-unquote, negotiated a ceasefire in Gaza and Israel, and the escalation was supposed to stop there in the very beginning of this second administration, and that did not happen. Now, if you did watch the first part, you'll notice that I am much more sympathetic to Donald Trump than the vast majority of the other panelists, maybe Ricky Varandas as the exception. I do think that there is a difference between a Trump administration and a Kamala Harris administration. I do believe that overall Trump does want peace and is actually upset that this ceasefire that he announced on social media was nothing more than Johnny nonsense. So what I want to do here is show Trump's reaction to the fact that that ceasefire did not take place. And we're going to do a small analysis of that after the fact, and then we're going to get to this forum, this debate, this panel, if you will, on Trump, Iran, the assassination attempts, and so much more. So buckle up. We're about to begin making sense of the madness.
That the sides accuse each other for violating the ceasefire. So
I think they both violated it. I'm not sure they did it intentionally. They couldn't rein people back. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it. So as soon as I get away from you, I'm going to see if I can stop it, okay?
Have you spoken to him this morning? How confident are you that Iran
I think it's been completely demolished. I think the reason we're here is because those pilots, those B-2 pilots, did an unbelievable job. And you know, the fake news, like CNN in particular, they're trying to say, well, I agree that it was destroyed, but maybe not that destroyed. You know what they're doing? They're really hurting great pilots that put their lives in the line. CNN is scum, and so is MSDNC. They're all, and frankly, the networks aren't much better. It's all fake news, but they should not have done that. Those pilots hit their targets. Those targets were obliterated, and the pilots should be given credit. They're not after the pilots, they're after me. They want to try and demean.
Do you believe that Iran can rebuild its nuclear program?
Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there? Absolutely not. That place is under rock. That place is demolished. The B-2 pilots did their job. They did it better than anybody could even imagine. They hit late in the evening. It was dark with no moon, and they hit that target with every one of those things, and that place is gone. But when I see CNN all night long, they're trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't really as demolished as we thought. It was demolished. You take a look at the pinpricks, and you see that place is gone. And I will say, I think CNN ought to apologize to the pilots of the B-2s. I think that MSDNC ought to apologize. I think these guys really, these networks and these cable networks are real losers. You really are. You're real losers.
Israel says that they violated the peace.
You're gutless losers. I say that to CNN because I watch it. I have no choice. I got to watch that garbage. It's all garbage. It's all fake news. But I think CNN is a gutless group of people. And the people that run it, nobody even knows it's been sold so many times. But the people that run it ought to be ashamed. MSDNC, a guy named Brian Roberts, he heads it. He's a disgrace. He's a weak, pathetic disgrace.
Israel says that Iran violated the peace agreement and the ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours You don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
So let me just stop it right there. And by the way, I'm sorry I didn't warn everybody, but if you watch the last debate, there's going to be some coarse language in this one, not just from Trump. Okay? So this, unfortunately, is Trump being naive, in my opinion. Okay? As I stated, before they hit these facilities, it was never about just hitting these facilities. It's not just about regime change. Okay? It is about Israel expanding not only their power, their geopolitical power in the area, but their landmass on top of everything. And Trump has really set himself up in a very dangerous position right now, as the headlines are that they've just arrested, I believe, 11 in the United States. There's all this talk of Iranian sleeper cells, whether real or not. If Trump gets assassinated, and we've already had 2 different attempts, who do you think they blame it on? Who do you think they blame it on? And then what happens? Okay, I think that these strikes were a mistake. I always knew it wasn't just going to be CNN, that all of the media and Israeli intelligence and the bots online were always going to say that they still had a program, even though, look, again, we don't know whether they had a nuclear weapon or not. If they did, they never used it. It was always weeks and weeks and weeks away. The people that I talked to on this very program, high-level people that would kind of espouse that, many of them would say, yes, they have it, but they don't have the quote-unquote delivery systems for it. Now, again, I don't know whether or not that's true. I do know, as I stated in the first part of the debate last night, that nuclear energy in itself is now about to be utilized by human beings, especially in the West, on a level we've never, ever seen via these AI data centers with these micro nuclear facilities on site of the, when I say data center, we're not talking about a building, okay? We are talking about a landmass. Go look at the one they're trying to build in Kentucky with Meta, okay? So think about that. So if they don't have that power in Iran, how are they going to keep up, especially in the realms of artificial intelligence? This is the next level of warfare. And I am extremely, extremely concerned with all of this. But what I saw there is a man that doesn't want war. Okay, and you can say it's an act, and you can say it's fake, and you can say I'm falling for WWE wrestling. That's fine. You can have that opinion. I'm trying to use my discernment. I'm trying to use what I've seen around me. I know there are those hypercritical on both sides. Some people think I'm not, Trump enough. Other people think I'm some kind of lackey for Trump. Clearly, I've shown not only how concerned but upset I am that we're even in this situation. And I've questioned, especially with the interview with Rob Dew earlier this week, or it may have been last week, actually probably about a week ago, where I ask whether or not the executive has any real power when it comes to these things. It's a great question to ask, folks. So without further ado, we're going to pick up where we left off after I showed the picture of Trump grabbing his ear after being shot, even though some of these people don't believe that was real. And the one guy said that, he didn't even grab his ear. We had to pull that out. We're going to start it from there, and we're going to keep her rolling. Stay tuned.
I have been somewhere where there's been shots fired at a club. Similar thing. Somebody not that far got skimmed by they didn't even know what was happening. They literally looked. There's a little bit of blood. It happened so quickly. Adrenaline rush. I mean, You're up there, you hear shots. He didn't. Again, you guys are acting like he got shot.
And did they hold on? So you're at club. Somebody, I'm not saying you're not telling the truth. Obviously you are. But somebody gets shot. Did they jump back up and just start dancing at that point at the nightclub? Going, oh, dude.
Honestly, there's
Thank
just
God I didn't get hit. Oh, I did get hit.
no, but well, he wasn't dancing. He I think it was a very similar reaction where it's like, hey, what the hell just happened? You see a little bit of blood, and then all of a sudden your brain starts putting together the pieces that like, hey, I think something skinned me. Now, if you get shot like directly in the arm, in the chest, in the shoulder, but your ear is full of blood vessels. It doesn't take much to get some blood out of it. You can just get skimmed and get and it can start bleeding. And
Well, Ricky, let me ask you something. You've been doing this. You're an OG of this conspiracy game.
yes.
You do not think it's possible, even in the realm of possibility,
Wait. First of all,
that it was
that's
faked?
that's not what I'm saying. My point is, and that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's the problem with this conversation is that it's either or. It's like I'm not saying one.
But why is it a problem when they themselves have moved on? I mean, I could if we were like, if they're like he got shot, we're all like, whatever, bullshit,
Yeah, but
bullshit.
don't you
But
think it's possible-
they've even moved on.
But Sam, don't you also think it's possible that a person who they banned off every single platform, somebody who they were trying to put in jail, somebody
Unless you're trying to set precedents to
No,
get him as he's one of us.
and then my last point is but he already had a following. Like before he just killed Biden in a debate. He literally did not need to stage that. And if he was to stage something, that would be the worst timing to do it because he literally had all of the public on his side. You stage something, you get caught staging it, right? If for some reason it goes bad, all of a sudden he looks like an idiot and it could
go bad.
No, but it didn't go bad. It actually I mean it didn't really. I mean, I don't know how
It looked like fake as shit, man. Only the hardcore people are swallowing it.
What is it? You get skimmed by a bullet. Okay, pretend that really happened. Okay, and in some other situation, what a part of getting skimmed by a bullet and seeing some blood? What part of that? What is hard to believe?
It's the point I made earlier where he didn't go back ever again after the initial covering of the ear. He never goes back. And then it's also funny. I studied the crowd. When you freeze the frame, right when the first shot gets taken out, how many cell phones are in the crowd? How many have you guys looked into it? I'll tell you. 4
Except for that
cell
one
phones.
chick who's filming right at the beginning, does a kind of nod and is filming right at that moment.
There's
That's
4 cell
still
phones.
wild and nobody's explained it.
There's 4 cell phones. Where is that footage?
Well, I'm not saying it's not possible. Again, and all I'm saying is that Ricky,
can I jump in for a second, brother?
Going in either the direction, and honestly, like I said, when you go back in time and you look at the momentum of the election, the direction it was going, and you look at all the things that happened in the order that they happened, where he won a debate, he almost gets shot, Biden has COVID. Why? First of all, if it was staged, why would Biden play along? Why would he say he had COVID?
Because Biden is a part of the cog. I called a couple things on Rogan, and one thing I called, and again, it's guests that tell me this. It's not me finding it, discovering something, but I had a friend of mine who had a new album coming out, and he wanted to promote it. And we're all me and him are in recovery, and he told me that he was working with one of his clients that he was trying to help keep sober, was a high-end escort in Los Angeles, and he said that she used to party with Hunter Biden, and he laid it all out. He goes, they're going to get my father elected, and at some point they're going to throw him to the side, and they're going to install Kamala Harris into it, because Kamala Harris would be the official end of the illusion that the president is actually powerful, and that's demoralization. So it didn't happen on the timeline because this thing never happens on the timeline they think it is. It usually takes way longer than or we expect when we start giving days on, oh, this is going to happen on this day. The truth of the matter is, it did happen. He called it on my show. I talked about it on Rogan way before it happened, and as sure as shit, they chuck him to the side, and they put Kamala Harris in to run, and then she gets her dick kicked because Trump, I just think Trump does more of what they want.
Yeah, but I think that was the plan, but I think the plan was actually take him out, Biden wins, Biden isn't healthy, and then Harris takes over. That's what I think was supposed to happen.
I don't necessarily agree with that. Like I wrote a thread last July that got quite a bit of attention, and I think if you look at kind of the media angle on this, they were trying to push Biden out for like a year and a half, right? There was an article that came out in December of the previous year that Biden said, well, if I wasn't running against Trump, I wouldn't run. So there was all these different news sources basically trying to get Biden out. They were just looking for the right opportunity. I think they didn't expect things to turn the way they did.
And she was
in
awful,
July.
dude. Don't forget how bad she was. I didn't mean to cut you off, Jeremy.
Yeah, no worries, man.
Finish, but she was 10 times worse than they thought. It was easy to have her run when she's just like DA in San Francisco and she's not actually doing any cases. But when you run and she can't talk. I mean, they had people go, where? How much she spent on that that election? $1 billion, right? And you're like, where'd the $1 billion go? Paying for everyone to fill those arenas. That's where the money went. They had to pay everybody to come. A traveling circus followed her around so she could give the illusion of that she has this big following because they learned from Hillary Clinton when you had Bernie Sanders playing football fields and Hillary Clinton's pulling Sam Tripoli numbers in a cafeteria, and everyone's like, no one's following this chick. What are we fucking doing here? They learned from that, and that's why they had to put $1 billion into her because they knew they had to fill arenas to give the illusion that she had this groundswell.
But
Sorry,
I
Jeremy.
I was just gonna say, but I agree with you. I think that she did suck, and that's why they knew the only way she could win is if she didn't win and Joe Biden won for her and then stepped down because there's no way they didn't know when he was running against Trump that he was not going to last another 4 years. There's no way they hid how unhealthy he was, how sick he was. I just think there's absolutely no way that they actually thought, especially the people internally who was covering this up and really proactive in regards to trying to convince everybody that he was going to make it another 4 years. They knew. So I think the idea was get him in office, then he steps down because of health issues. She takes over. She never has to win an election because she sucked, and they knew that she couldn't. And then I think it was the last resort to have her try to win because they just couldn't. They had no other option.
So
I just
go ahead, Tease. I'm sorry.
Jason, I want to, or sorry, whoever, Wheezy. We're talking about an approximate figures insofar as come out publicly, about 17 million dead from the campaign initially within the first couple of weeks, approximately 80 million with some sort of severe life threat.
China, 400 million, they're saying.
Yeah, and that's the last one, which is 400 million, which have some sort of symptom, which is going to compound and get worse over time. Are any of us talking about accountability for that? Are any of us talking about going out and actually getting Daddy Warp Speed held accountable for his murdering countless families? Are any of us actually focused on what comes first in all of this? Oh, hey, imagine that. Gee, mission accomplished.
Let me just say this. I've forgotten about none of this stuff.
That's related. I don't. Yeah, he. Nobody's saying that Warp Speed was a good thing. I think a lot of people gave him shit for it. I mean, he was in a situation where obviously I mean, let's be honest. We don't think that he has the highest IQ in regards to like understanding how to handle the situation he was in. I think he got thrown. Some people, it's funny because the way we reflect on things are so different than what they were sometimes in the moment that they happened. Del Bigtree on the High Wire did a great episode, and I wish I could find it. And if I do find it, I'll share with you guys. He did a great episode where after Operation Warp Speed, a lot of people were obviously saying like this guy was supposed to be anti-vax. He was the only president or presidential candidate ever in the history of debates that even questioned vaccines publicly in a debate, which people don't realize because now it's become normalized thanks to some of these characters like RFK and maybe even Trump in that moment, putting it into the normies, universe. But at that time, that was a big deal, especially people like myself and others who have been harping at this for a really long time. Like the fact that somebody openly discussed it like that was a huge deal. He also met with Del Bigtree and RFK, which
he invited Dr. Andrew Whitfield and was sitting up front and center at his inauguration, which I was astounded by.
And again, so I'm not saying that he's and the problem with this conversation sometimes is that like if you say that that this is bad, then you must mean that's good or vice versa. And it's like I'm not saying that everything he does is great. All I'm saying is that when there is a W, when there is, and I think Don Jeffries has said this on the show multiple times, and I think Jason has too. Like, hey, in this specific situation, we can say that like, hey, this was a win, right? Putting out into the universe somebody who a lot of people liked, questioning vaccines on a debate, during a debate in front of, obviously many people watch the debates, and to me that was a huge win. Having conversations with Del Bigtree, RFK, Wakefield, and those type of people, to me, that's a win, right? Like just entertaining that idea. Prior to that, people forget, like, and too bad Brian Festa isn't on the show, because he's an attorney who's dealing with these lawsuits all over America. He'll tell you right from the get-go that prior to that, like, we were trending in the opposite direction. We're trending where every state was losing religious exemptions. They were force feeding more and more vaccines. And I hope having at least, and again, RFK is absolutely wrong when it comes down to foreign policy. Monica and I talked about this earlier today, about just the idea of like these people in our lives that, seem very critically thinking and seem to be open to ideas and discussions. And then that one topic, for some reason, they just all imagination and critical thinking goes out the window, and they're just stern with their opinions. And he is that person. He's like that. And so does Trump. Trump also seems to be like that on this one topic. Now, the why, I don't know. I mean, people have been saying Trump seems a little just unusual or not himself in that like 2-minute speech to the public about the Iran bombings. I don't know. RFK also seems to almost like he doesn't seem like himself when talking about this topic. Now, is it blackmail? Monica and I talked about this before. Many of us have went down the Mossad rabbit hole. When you look at like, Jack Rubenstein with the JFK assassination, when you look at like Mossad's link to 9/11, when you look at Mossad's link to just about every conspiracy you could probably bring up, they seem to be just as bad, or at least the equivalent of the CIA. So who knows what they have on these guys? Maybe the Elon Musk tweet wasn't commented by Trump because maybe there was something there. Who knows? I mean, maybe they have something on these guys. But to say that, like, okay, if I say one good thing about Trump in this one circumstance, then that must mean, I'm apologizing for Operation Warp Speed. I'm apologizing for, it
Ricky,
just.
that's not what I said. What I'm saying is that what that whole fiasco did in theatrics, was to distract us from accountability. I wasn't trying to say that you were defending him.
Me, but I'm saying in general, like I've seen a lot of these discussions where people will say, oh, like, you defend, somebody might say something positive about Trump in one circumstance. You're like, oh yeah, but what about Operation Warp Speed? I'm like, yeah, well, he was absolutely wrong about that. He absolutely got that wrong. He was even wrong about bragging about it. I thought it was absurd that he would brag about such a stupid thing. Like, hey, but that's how big his ego is. And again, he's a flawed human being, and his ego sometimes, I think, makes him do ridiculous things like that. I don't even think he realized that he was actually losing his base, because a lot of people who were, I mean, I was going to anti-vax or anti-COVID vax protests. I'm sure many of you were too. I was there because I was protesting the lockdowns, but I also saw a lot of Trump signs because a lot of those beliefs were aligning. And it's not to say that means that you have to, agree with him or think that he's the savior. But I do think, and I agree with Wheezy, like when they played the same trick over and over again, and there's people who will talk about their Obama experience where they thought he was going to be the savior, and then there's people who talk about so many past presidents where it's like, oh, when he was in office, like I thought he was going to be the savior, and people do fall for it over and over again. So I can get understanding that you want to put Trump into the basket of he's exactly like the others. And I'm not to say that he's drastically different, but I do think he's slightly different than the others.
See,
well,
I think
the thing I would say is Charlie's been a mime, and I'd love to hear what Charlie has to say.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Sorry, Charlie.
I didn't get into the Trump shooting. I just have no energy on it either way. It was happening while I was having some heavy shit going on in my life, and I just did not give a fuck about it at all. I just consider it all, whether it's real or stage, I consider it all part of what George Carlin said, being born into this world, you get a ticket to the circus, but when you're born in America, you get a front row seat. It was summer. It was beautiful day on the weekend. Enjoy the show, whether it's real or whether it's not. It doesn't matter in the long run. It accomplishes the same goal: demoralization. It takes the entire. It moves the Overton window about what's acceptable, what we're willing to investigate and not investigate. That the FBI is the largest domestic terrorist organization operating inside America. You know, I mean, there's just a lot of conversations we should be having that we're not. So I just never got into the Trump stuff. I just really, I said, you guys take it. I'm going to outsource this one. I just don't I did at that moment in my life, I did not have the energy for it.
Well, nobody did. What did they hold? One hearing in Congress on it, and that was it. And neither side. I mean, especially now that the ridiculous narrative is that Iran was behind it, that's going to be the attack. Because most of the Democrats are like Wheezy. Well, a lot of them think it didn't happen, but the Republicans, if they're going to say that it was an act of God that saved his life. After evil Iran tried to kill him, that's it. Nobody's going to investigate it and say, wait a minute, why did the Secret Service stand down? Why was he standing up with nobody in front of him like Lee Harvey Oswald? After he was shot, they thought maybe they know there could be more shots coming or something. They left him as a dead. That they're supposed to knock him down and be on top of him and just escort him out of there. They didn't. They let him get up there and do his pumps fist in the air, fight with the Iwo Jima photograph and. So many questions there. And of course, the guy he had 2 alleged attempts on his life, and both of them happened to be in a Blackwater commercial. I mean, what are the odds of that? I mean, how many people are in Blackwater commercials? Well, if you're a patsy for a Trump assassination, you are, I guess. I don't know.
So, Ricky, have you ever entertained the thought that maybe, perhaps, a lot of this stuff is staged? Like you've talked about Biden and Kamala being bad and panicking. And you talk about it like you really believe that. And that's how a lot of people, normies, quote unquote, believe that. I believe it was designed to be tanked and put Trump. And that's why you would fake an assassination to even put him up in the higher pedestal. It's complete nonsense. And then remember his Secret Service. He had all these women around him. His own base was like, it was DEI. It was the Secret Service behind him. What did Trump say? They did a magnificent job.
Yes,
they were great.
Yes.
Come on, man.
Well, I mean,
it's ridiculous.
Can I just address some of this, Ricky?
I mean, that's not Wheezy. That's not a smart move. Hey, the people who are protecting me every day, let me publicly bash them. Would that be smart?
Well, Ricky, I was in D.C. a few months ago. I was right by the White House. I saw these Secret Service dudes, 6'5", 300 pounds, all jacked and muscle. And all he could get was these 2 little chicks in front of him to provide cover. They couldn't even holster a gun, bro. She was the makeup artist. It's a freaking sham, man.
But they also didn't provide Secret Service for RFK Jr. What was that? I mean, obviously they don't care about protecting specific type.
It's all theatrics, man. It's all theatrics.
The theater? But yeah,
I don't buy any of it. I mean, look at Iran right now, bro. I know we're talking about everything, but Iran is trying to get a CBDC. They're in it. It's all theatrics, man.
I was thinking
I don't even know what is
Wheezy.
I'm all for this, but I'm not one of those people that like I get lost in just these terms, right? Because what happens is like people will try to make a point. You're waiting for the point, and then they go Palantir, and it's all or false flag, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds like it makes sense, but let me dissect what they're saying and see like where's the actual evidence. I'm not saying that it can't be true. I'm just saying I'm not going to be persuaded by saying because it possibly could be true, it must be true.
And let me say this because I really want to jump in here because Ricky, you've kind of talked about how, well, they did it because I'm not looking at any motivations in the Trump assassination at all. I think there's a million motivations to kill the guy. I'm looking at the physical evidence, and I did. The idea that I didn't question it, absolutely did. Derek Bros did a very detailed piece. We talked almost immediately afterwards. I have questioned where all the videos are. In fact, it's one of the main questions I have. There should be 100 videos of that, and there's like 4. And I've watched every single one of them top to bottom, and they don't show much else. I've also showed, the still frames and short quote unquote CCTV camera footage of the individual. I think that we actually have a lot of the same questions on there, but I just think they actually tried to shoot him. I think the reason that you had those women there is because they were not capable. I mean, it did look like a clown show while they pulled him to the car. It was ridiculous. I think, again, this idea that it has to be one or the other. And I also want to address what T said about Operation Warp Speed, because he's not wrong, right? There's not going to be any accountability of that. And a lot of that was through the Trump administration and him basically taking a program through Adept and Protect that had been around for, I think, 7 years at that point and started in 2012 or 2013 and just letting them run wild with it. I think a lot of that is based in ignorance and not in malice. And I have to factor that in, unfortunately. I think, don't get me wrong, especially with Biden and his administration, although there's a lot of corruption there, it's almost totally based in ignorance. Like, they actually think that they're doing a good thing because the world is a superpower, et cetera. And I think a lot of that thinking comes into Trump's mind with his actions with Iran and his relationships with Netanyahu, et cetera. Terrible. They're terrible. I mean, they have to be called out. The thing is that we haven't had any accountability for any of this stuff since Iran-Contra, bringing up Iran again. And that's back in the 80s, and we barely got accountability there. So, look, I also think that Ricky made a good point when he was talking about the fact that the conversations are on the table now that were never on the table, and we have to put that into perspective. I had a long conversation with G. Edward Griffin recently, and we talked about that. We talked about how the rhetoric has at least changed, and a lot of the rhetoric sounds good. And, we also explored the fact that when people go too far, in my opinion, and that everything's a conspiracy theory, and then they do themselves no favors by putting stuff out that I believe is just patently false. At the same time, because we're not getting the type of results we actually want and people voted for, what are we actually changing in the system? And that's the question we continue to have. And, G. Edward Griffin at 94 years old, he's had Freedom Force International. He does the Red Pill events. He says his focus now in this last stretch of his career and his life is to try to find people that are willing to take back their local government. And quite frankly, I haven't heard or seen a better answer than that. And I always tell people, don't be ignorant. Think globally. Try to look at these things from a larger perspective. But what can you change at home? What can you change in your neighborhood? What can you change in your county? There's a big reason I left New York to go to Iowa. You know what I mean?
Well, you're right. I mean, it has to change locally, but I'll give you an example here in Fairfax County, where I live, and was one of that in Loudoun County, my neighboring county, were at the epicenter of the parent protests against school boards. Well, what happened? Nothing was accomplished. Trump, one of his executive orders was to ban DEI from government, from schools and everything. Recently, my school board voted 17-0 to continue the gender programs with elementary school students. So they're ignoring his DEI executive order, and apparently the voters were unable to get any of these clowns out of there. And that's at the lowest level. Now, it doesn't matter whether maybe they're not counting the votes there. They might not be. Or people are just that stupid and we're outnumbered. That's the problem. Anarchy is sounding better and better to me. I don't have any argument against them anymore. I really don't, because what is the argument against the anarchists at this point? Because what authority is legitimate at this point?
Don, do you want to know my argument against the anarchists? And this is just like at the baseline. Mm-hmm. We've had some form of government since we elected sheriffs to stop mob rule when we were settlers. At the end of the day, if you take away government, that's essentially what you're going to have is posses of sheriffs to regulate laws that kind of no longer exist. It seems kind of pie in the sky because even at its lowest level, we've deputized people and given somebody authority. And really, just like government, that is the authority through force. So
kind of sounds fun.
I don't know that
Jason,
any of this sounds fun. Go ahead, Tease.
In essence, what you would need to responsibly transition from a continuum of government would be a civilian awareness, the likes of which we saw in the very burgeoning of the United States. And you can look at the education of the founding fathers, and they were really just farmers and average lawyers and people. And then they did their civic duty in order to be able to speak truth to power. Except then when you look a little bit deeper, you can look at the language being revised so that it doesn't say subject, it says citizen, which translates to municipal slave. So the idea that they were actually completely on board with liberation seems a little bit more of a mythos that was conjured in order to get us to go along with the whole thing. So the impetus very much is on us to up our game on a local level. Absolutely, 100%. That is what we should be doing. But to then invest that same notion in the legitimacy of gubernare, of mind control, is fundamentally, foundationally a folly. It does nothing other than equate to human slavery. We need to reach a point wherein we have the maturity to go about engaging one another with the appropriate civility and responsibility that goes therewith.
Well, I want to bring it back to what Wheezy was saying a few minutes ago about the kind of looking how a lot of this is kind of play acting in a lot of ways. Just the news cycle today is so strange to me. I sent him a message about this a few minutes ago, but if you look at today, Iran sends 13 missiles or 14 missiles because they want to send the exact same number that the U.S. sent, but they told the U.S. beforehand, so nobody was there, nothing happened, but they sent them, and it was just done just in case. And then there's a ceasefire, but the ceasefire doesn't take effect for 6 hours, so just in case Israel's going to get a few more hours of bombing in. Does anybody else see that news cycle as strange? It's just very weird to me.
I think the whole thing's weird, brother.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing's weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd like to get everybody's opinion, because really one of the things I wanted to discuss was, and we kind of, we've definitely have talked about it, but not in depth. Where do you guys think this is going? Monica and I talked about this earlier today about okay, is this going to be one of those things where it goes away, or do you guys see this escalating? Because there's some people who are panicking and they're like, this is literally the beginning of World War III, and just like the other world wars, it was slow baby steps. Nobody saw it, and then boom, it was like little event, bigger event, and the next thing you know, you're in a global war. There is concern about the alliances between, China, Russia, Iran, these other, groups and whatnot. What do you guys think is, what's the end game? Like, is this really, or is this really going to escalate? Do you think they are going to eventually succeed in, a regime change in Iran? Which, again, another thing, Trump ran on the anti-war card, and now he's talking about the thing that he said he wasn't going to do, and that's get involved and force a regime change, which seems really weird and whatnot. So
he just said they agreed to a ceasefire, and he's naming it the 12-day war. I don't know what's going to happen, but it may go to Jeremy's point about the ridiculous cycle. I don't know.
In other words,
the ceasefire doesn't take effect for 6 hours, is what it said.
Right.
So I don't know if you guys follow. Is it Dominic Michael Trippi? He always is doing some great job with coverage, and he was like, "So Israel's still getting some last carpet bombing in."
Well, can I just pause it so then I can get the President Bush mission accomplished sign behind me? And
also, Gaza's sped up in this time period. So as much as that was being reported on, now it's being blanketed as they're upping up the genocide.
Well, I mean,
Syria too, probably.
Speaking of false flags, October 7th, I think we are all in agreement that there's no way they didn't see that coming, and they're literally using it as a justification to do whatever the hell they want. And it's quite obvious. And if you guys, and I told Monica about it today, I actually thought most people knew, but there is a great documentary that came out, or that's been out, called The BB Files, that has just recently got censored right before all this started going down. So right before, things started escalating with Iran, magically a documentary called The BB Files about all the corruption and all the issues and corruption that he's been involved in disappears, and it's still it's still available on Amazon Prime and Google or whatever, but it just tells you that it's not available in your location, and then people use VPNs to try every location, and it's not available anywhere. So you can still find the trailer on YouTube, and you can find it. It exists, like it's there, but it won't let you watch it. Thank God that the wonderful world of the internet and open source, people who believe in open source and just sharing stuff online, people are uploading it. You can find it on YouTube. It's called the BB Files. James Corbett also did a great a short documentary called Meet. I think it's like Meet BB Yinahu, however you say his last name. But he did a great little short documentary about him too that goes deep into his background and whatnot. So I highly recommend people seeking that out and looking into just how big of a piece of crap this guy is, and really just learning a little bit about his history, because you're going to see a lot more of him on TV, and you'll be surprised how many people don't really know anything about him, and they just think that he's just great friends with everybody, and I think like Monica and I talked about before, one thing that people have to really consider is the fact that no matter who's in power, they're always pro-Israel, which tells you something about the pull that they have. I mean, what's everybody's thoughts on, is Israel the Anglo-American pawn, or is America the Israel pawn? Or are they scissoring like Tisha?
Yeah, good.
There you go.
I
That's
would
better.
say the fact that we still don't have the Epstein files would make me really wonder what that means.
Well, again, the Epstein files, one of the big reasons you don't have that is because, we mentioned Iran-Contra before. Epstein was an arms dealer with Israeli intelligence, with the Americans in Iran-Contra, 100%. Again, the guy had a fake identity where he had a passport and a Saudi Arabian identity. Again, people don't understand Israel bought the weapons from Czechoslovakia and Eastern Europe in that, and then shipped them down there for a plausible deniability circle. I told people from the very beginning I was skeptical that we were getting anything Epstein ever, and I remain skeptical on that. Now, what you just said, who controls who? I don't think either nation state controls each other. Look at the interests that own the Lockheed Martins, the Raytheons, the banks that are involved, the International Bank of Settlements, etc. I think that is more what you're looking at with the Anglo-American Euro power structure. I think the real power structure...
Hey, Jason Bermas.
Yes.
Can I ask you something real quick?
Sure.
Saddam Hussein, his death, when they said that they hung him and everything, was that on the up and up? Because I have a whole bunch of information that shows that it was one of his doubles.
Could have been.
That was
at the time,
trial.
I would just say this. At the time that they said that they got Saddam, there were open History Channel documentaries that were purporting to say that he had 6 body doubles and sometimes showing you 3 of them at a time. I really can't speak to whether or not the guy they found in the hole.
Because Christopher Welcher Watcher, WATCH Watcher, CHLER, he got awarded like the esteemed cross when it came to like the Naval Cross or whatever, for killing Saddam in 2003, and I have all that stuff like backed up. They killed Saddam and his 2 sons like before, like early on in the war, like a month into the war, literally. It was April of 2003, and I have all that stuff that they said. And Rumsfeld, even Dick Cheney admitted that, like, yeah, we took him out. And it was around the time of the Pat Tillman murder, and it was a murder in my estimation. Maybe I'm wrong, but it was around that time that they started turning things around. Early on in the war, the invasion of Iraq, and I could be wrong, but I have all this information. And Christopher Welcher, he did a on C-SPAN. People can look this up. Robert Schuller, the priest. People look it up. Well, Robert Schuller. You can find like where they claim that Saddam was killed like early on in the war, and no one else has talked about this. And Christopher Watcher's mother came out and did interviews on people's different alternative media shows like Maria Heller, and talked about how they were afraid for her son's safety. And apparently Christopher Watcher, he ended up accepting a job with the Black Ops and things like that. And he was awarded. No, he was awarded literally on CNN. It was on CNN. He was awarded. I don't know the exact award or whatever, but he was awarded. The fact that he took out Saddam and his two sons originally.
I believe he won a SP. I'm kidding. That was a joke.
All right, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, I would just say this. I mean, just talking about the skepticism of, killing some of these people. Obviously the bin Laden story is something to be questioned. A lot of these people were killed or captured many times during that time period. I forget the one guy that was supposedly killed in a motorcycle chase, and I think they killed him 3 or 4 times.
Jason Osama was like reported to be killed like 4 times.
No,
I have it
again.
Even like, what was the other one? It was like literally it was December of 2001 on Fox News and on CNN. They reported it that he was dead.
I mean, several times. Again, I always remain skeptical. I think, just because I was talking about Epstein, I'm not sure if that's why you brought that up. I think Epstein is dead. I don't think that if you're going to do those type of things with an asset, like you look at somebody like Timothy McVeigh, and McVeigh seemed to think that they were going to save him at the very end. That they were basically...
There were people, yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong. There were people that said that he was still breathing.
Again,
he was still breathing.
Again, I've watched the people from the ATF tell me that they didn't show up to work that day for drills and that there were bombs in the building and those type of things. I've never seen an eyewitness on camera talk about whether or not he was breathing after the fact. I've heard the mythos out there, but I have heard interviews with his cellmate saying, that he thought he was going to be rescued at the very end. Whether those
and I'm not against it. Like literally, I'm not against what you're saying. Like I'm not. I just remember people talking about like 6 months before 9/11. Timothy McVeigh was scheduled to be executed for execution, and there were people that claimed that he was still breathing. And that has nothing to do with the Epstein stuff. I know that gets like thrown in with that, but like the Chandra Levy stuff. Do you remember Jason? Do you
well aware of
Chandra
Chandra Levy and her alleged affair with somebody, and they couldn't find her dead body, and then they found it in a park. I think over a year later, right?
Maybe I shouldn't be bringing that up. But
well, no, I understand. Again, that woman, just like Monica Lewinsky, seemed to have ties to Israel. Yeah. Sexual blackmail is a tool of not only the Israelis, but again, you go back to, we mentioned mind control. Go to Operation Midnight Climax, where you were using blackmail and drugs in that regard on both coasts with probably underage prostitutes at the time. The sexual blackmail stuff is absolutely a part of it. I guess because I do have to jump in a second. Just getting back to Ricky's original question.
But what you're saying is true. Like what you're saying is true. Like it ties into what Tom O'Neill was talking about, and even Dave McGowan, the late Dave McGowan, was talking about things like that, right? Like Operation Midnight Climax.
I try not to sit here and spout fiction, my friend.
People think it's science fiction still.
Yeah, that's not what I'm here doing. I talk about things. No, I get it. I try to talk about things that are documented. I don't think, again, Ricky, going back to your question, I don't think anybody rules the world, any nation state, any cabal or group. I think they'd like to think that. Like somebody like Roy Cohn, who was a mentor to Trump and Roger Stone, he thought, go watch documentaries on Roy Cohn. He thought he ran the world. He thought every major decision was going through him. Maybe that's a little hubris, but at the same time, a lot of major decisions and manipulations were going through Roy Cohn. Charlie, I saw you wanted to say something. Go for it.
I wanted you. You mentioned you're leaving, so I wanted you to make sure to let everybody know where they can find you, support your work, and check out some of your films that you've produced in the past if they're interested in one-stop shop for all that. Where can people go?
God bless your soul, Charlie Robinson. Everywhere at Jason Bermas. That's Bermas. I do have documentary films. I'd love for you to check them out. They're free everywhere. Shade the Motion Picture, Invisible Empire, and New World Order Defined for the big picture stuff, for the 9/11 stuff, Fabled Enemies, and Loose Change Final Cut. But I am encouraging people to go check out the 45-minute TMZ documentary as well on United 23 and realize how much you've been lied to about that event, and that's just a microcosm of that entire event, Charlie.
Yeah.
Folks, thank you so much for joining me on this Making Sense of the Madness episode. I thought it was a great forum. Remember to thumbs it up, subscribe, share. Please consider donating down below. The links are there. I can't do it without you. As always, it is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and I will see you all on the flip side.